presentation is part of our Critical Processes series co-produced with PRI's MedAccred program. This one is on plastics, extrusion and injection molding. I'm Courtney Stevens, an attorney in Medmarc's Risk Management Department. On behalf of Medmarc and today's presenters, Dave Rittenhouse, Sasha Brishkovski, and Roy Holmberg, thank you for joining us. Dave Rittenhouse is currently a manufacturing and supply chain consultant for MedAccred. He has recently retired from the plastics and healthcare industry, in which he was most recently the Vice President Global Supply Chain Manager for Bayer Healthcare Diagnostics. Sasha Brishkovski is a Supplier Quality Engineer with Depew Synthes of Johnson & Johnson. He has over 20 years of experience. Roy Holmberg is an Advanced Sourcing Engineer for Stryker and has over 10 years of experience, including 8 years of plastic part design and 2 years of sourcing and plastic part processing. He is a licensed professional engineer and an ISO 13485 certified lead auditor. With that, I am pleased to turn things over to Dave, who will begin today's presentation.
Well, thank you. I'm Dave Rittenhouse, and the first slide we have here is the agenda that we'll be talking about today. We'll chat about the scope of the plastics task group auditing process. We will talk about its primary focus, which is actually manufacturing. We'll give a few examples of some product issues and challenges, and then we'll launch into what the key process audit elements are. We'll discuss the technical standards to which we require compliance, give a few examples of some of the top non-conformances we see, and we'll address some of the typical root causes of those non-conformances. We'll finish it up talking a little bit about what is the value of all of this to the medical device industry. So the scope. We're primarily at the present time looking at plastics injection molding and plastics extrusion. And if you look here at the slide, you'll see there are some sub-areas of plastics injection molding as well as plastics extrusion that we address. And we also look at primarily two types of materials, thermoplastics and thermosets. And I have a third type of material listed here, elastomers and silicones, which of course could be either thermoplastics or thermosets, but we break out to a certain extent the elastomers and the silicones because they have some special characteristics that we do take a look at. We do primarily target the manufacturing processes. This audit is not a quality management system audit, although we are interested in whoever's being audited having a quality management system in place. We do not actually go into depth to your quality management system itself. We are trying to ensure that you have consistent and comprehensive practices for your quality, that you have good process and product consistency, that your machines and your tools operate in a reliable manner, and to the extent that it impacts those areas, we're interested also in the health, safety, and environment of the facility that is being audited. At this time, I'd like to invite Roy to talk to us for a couple minutes about some of the product issues and challenges that we see in the plastics industry.
Thank you, Dave. So some of the product issues and challenges that we're looking to resolve are listed here, and I'm just going to go over these pretty quickly, not read them word for word. That first product there had an issue with additional plastic being flash in the arterial sampling port that caused issues. The second one was with pipette tips, which was molded incorrectly. The third one was for an electric home care bed and had contaminated material in the plastic housing. And the last one was a fluidics management system pack that had molding irregularity. And this is some of the items that we're looking to address with the MedAccred audit. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Sasha to talk about key process audit elements.
We're going to look at the key process audit elements for plastics. We're looking end-to-end manufacturing and supply chain. So basically, we look at the material receipt, acceptance, and storage. We do look at the compounding as required of the material. We do look at the material preparation itself. We'll look at primary plastic processing, such as injection molding and extrusion at this point. We look in curing and annealing as required. We also look at secondary processing operations as needed. These are post-molding. We look at the material and product traceability as well, and also packaging, storage, and delivery. Dave?
Yes. So again, we're very manufacturing focused, so therefore we're very much interested in that end-to-end supply chain. But there are a number of other things that we're also looking at as well. As I already said, this is not a quality management system audit, but the first question that we ask is, do you have a quality management system certification? And that is a requirement that we have. For example, are you ISO 9001 certified? That would be sufficient, for example. Now, some of the audit basics that we look at, as we're going through, we're basically always testing three things. Number one, do you have a procedure in place? Does a procedure exist? Number two, is that procedure comprehensive? Does it really adequately address the process for which that procedure exists? And finally, and most importantly, and where we really spend most of our time, is on your compliance. Are you really doing what you said you were going to do? Because this is really what it's all about in order to get that good performance. Another key thing that we look at is personnel, and we look at it from basically two standpoints. We look at it from the standpoint of, are the people trained? And we also test, are they qualified? Now, there's some overlap, obviously, between training and qualification, but there are also some different points there. Another area that we look at is tooling, and Roy will talk to us about that.
So one of the items that we are extremely focused on is the tooling when it comes down to plastics. This area is generally overlooked when you think about other quality management system audits. And in tooling, we're focused on four main areas. One being the storage of the tool, and how it's treated, making sure that it is protected from the environment, that it's not going to become damaged. Number two is the cleaning of it and what process chemicals are used to clean it to make sure that all of the mold release and mold saver is removed from the product so you don't have contamination in your resin. Number three is the maintenance, how the tool is maintained and tracking of that maintenance. And lastly, the assembly of the tool, making sure that that is repeatable and documented so that if it ever becomes disassembled, anybody can come back and reassemble the tool and continue to mold. Another key process is process validation, and I'm going to pass it off to Sasha to talk about that.
Thank you, Roy. As a part of the checklist, we'll look at key process validation elements. So from that perspective, we look at for evidence of a master validation plan. We look to see and look at IQQ, PQ. When we look at those type of validations, we're looking to see what type of a statistical basis was assessed as a part of the OQ and PQ. We'll look at the measurement system analysis or gauge analysis capability, process planning documents such as flowchart, FMEA, and control plan. We do look at the software itself as far as validation goes, and we do establish and look for any ongoing monitoring post-validation activities. And lastly, we're looking to see also whether the validation, process validation was approved by the customer itself. So that's a high-level overview of the process validation. With that being said, I'll turn this next slide to Dave Rittenhouse.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the different aspects of the manufacturing operation that maybe are very specific to plastics, but now we start to get into some things which are also what you might find anywhere in a manufacturing operation. For example, quality control is a very important audit element. And we look at the quality control process for your raw materials. For example, do you have COAs or COCs for them? Are you doing any of your own inspection for raw materials that are coming in? We're, of course, interested once you start to process those raw materials at the in-process quality control that is going on. What are you doing? Are you looking at, for instance, dimensions? Are you doing any visual inspections on them? You may have other special inspections that are necessary, and we evaluate that. And then we're also looking, of course, at the final inspection of the product that you are making. Then there are also some important support functions that we take a look at. For example, we take a good look at your facilities. And as part of that look, we're interested in what is your capital program? Do you, in fact, have a capital program? Are you ensuring that your facility is going to remain a viable facility into the future? We look at your maintenance program. Do you have a good maintenance program in place? Are you following it? Do you have good records? Do you have good calibration? And one of the things that we also look at here that everybody should be aware of is we want to know what your spares program is. Have you defined a program for spares? Do you have spares on site? If you have spares on site, what is your reason for inventorying them? How do you inventory them? How do you access them? How do you keep track? Another area that is common to many facilities, but not all, it's not a requirement that you have a clean room or a white room, but many processors do in fact have a clean room or a white room, and we take a good look at that. While we're taking a look at your clean room and white room, we pay particular attention to, do you have good process segregation within those clean and white rooms? Are you making sure that a process that you're doing in that, say in your clean room, is not in any way releasing contaminants into the clean room that could then end up in another product? We're also interested in how are you keeping that clean white room in pristine shape? What kind of cleaning processes do you have in place? So as we are looking at your facility, there are some technical standards that we are particularly interested in your compliance for. For example, in the clean room area that we were just talking about, we look at ISO 14644-1 or their equivalents. There are also a number of key medical industry standards that are of great interest to us. The QMS certification, we're looking at ISO 13485, ISO 9001, AC 8004, and for those of you not aware of what AC 8004 is, AC 8004 is actually a MedAccred internal quality management system audit criteria list, and we're also we do accept, for those of you that are doing a lot of automotive work and have selected this as your QMS certification, we do accept IATF ISO 16949. Now, one of the really key documents that we have is, of course, the FDA 21 CFR Part 820. So you should definitely be very familiar with that, and your facility should be following that closely because many of the aspects of the audit, in fact, relate back to that. Sasha talked a little bit about process validation, and of course, the key document around process validation is the GHTF process validation guidance from back in January 2004. And we actually, I think, had a little picture of that whenever Sasha's slide was up. But this one is, again, something with which you should be very, very familiar for our particular audit. So what are some of the top non-conformances that we run into as we are conducting our audits? Well, I think really the top non-conformance we run into is comprehensive documentation of processes. We never go into a facility, you should never say never, you should always avoid always, but nevertheless, I think we never go into a facility that doesn't have lots and lots of processes documented. But what we often encounter is there are some gaps that exist within all of those procedures. Or sometimes those procedures don't link together well. Sometimes it's even a surprise to the people that are being audited that they had somehow failed to have that particular documentation in place. One of the areas, especially for that, is in clean room and white room procedures. We often see some gaps in that area. Software-controlled equipment. When we talk about software-controlled equipment, in general, we're talking about robots. And a lot of facilities are using robots. What we find is that people know how to use their robots, they know how to set them up, they know how to program them, but they have not necessarily written a procedure for how that's to be done, or the procedure they have is very sketchy and really not an adequate procedure. So that's just something that people should be aware of. And last but not least, we often see an issue with the master process validation plan. We find that companies have, for one reason or another, left some gaps in this, that they haven't considered everything that they should. If you look at our audit criteria, you can see that we have a number of things that we look at for this master validation plan, but you have to have an idea of how all the products that you're making that are medical device related are covered by the master validation plan. Now, what causes those problems? Well, this is kind of interesting, but in my experience, it's almost amusing. I think probably the biggest root cause for issues that we run into is what we call tribal knowledge. And what it is that people know something so well that they haven't bothered to document their procedure for it adequately. They don't see the reason to because they're an expert at it. They know how to do it. Why do I need to write all of this down? Of course, when we're doing an audit, it's our expectation that all processes of interest to the audit, in fact, have a good procedure in place. And this is really, I think you have to look at yourself and say, gosh, the things that I know the best, did I really document that well enough as a procedure? Contributing to that problem is sometimes there are misunderstandings of the requirement, or people are just unaware of the requirement. Again, I would suggest that people become familiar with the audit criteria that we have, where we have listed out the requirements that we as a task group feel are very important for you to have an understanding. And those problems come together basically to create a situation where there's a lack of procedures in place, or a procedure not being well defined or not in depth, and also sometimes, like I said earlier, they're just not connected together very well, so one doesn't really know what to do next. Okay, so with that, I would like to go ahead and invite Sasha and Roy to talk a little bit about the value in all this, and I think that Sasha is going to talk to us first about exactly how we have approached this.
Thank you, Dave. So what is the medical device industry doing to improve plastics injection molding, extrusion quality, and supply chain oversight? So in essence, we all contribute to MedAccred, and we have various task groups that work on the specific processes. In this case, we have a plastics task group that consists of a number of OEMs, such as Baxter, Becton Dickinson, Johnson & Johnson, Philips, and Stryker. We do have subject matter experts from the OEMs, the contract manufacturers as well, and suppliers that contributing into development of the audit criteria itself. We do review and approve the SME auditors that will be conducting the process audits for MedAccred through PRI. We do look at the audits themselves, and we do grant the supplier accreditation through MedAccred. Roy will cover the rest of the bullets from MedAccred perspective. Roy?
Thank you, Sasha. So this first bullet here is one that I'm extremely passionate about because I am part of the Stryker rollout team that is rolling out MedAccred to our entire organization, not just to the plastics industry, but all across the MedAccred accreditations. So what we're looking at doing as part of this OEM-CM business is we're starting to look at changing to awarding new business only to MedAccred accredited companies that oversee their critical, which will help us oversee our critical process supply chain. The next part of this one is suppliers are starting to use MedAccred accreditation to ensure final product quality and improve manufacturing operations. In fact, what I've seen with a lot of our suppliers that are reviewing the MedAccred audit criteria is they're doing internal audits based on that audit criteria and making improvements prior to scheduling their audit. With that being said, I believe we're now ready to proceed to questions.
We will now begin the Q&A session. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it using the Q&A panel located at the bottom right of your screen. After typing your questions in the space at the bottom, hit the send button. Please be sure to direct your questions to all panelists in the Ask menu. Your questions will not be seen by other members of the audience. And it looks like we do have a few questions here already. These look like they're kind of on the MedAccred process. Could you tell us what an audit looks like and how long it takes?
Yes, an audit, of course, it all depends on the scope of the audit and how many processes there are. And, different facilities are going to have different numbers of the processes. For example, an injection molding facility might be doing injection molding as well as doing insert injection molding. And that would result in us taking a look at both of those processes. Typically, one like that would be about 3 days in length. Sometimes they might throw in some of the other more exotic injection molding techniques, and then it might lengthen out to a 4-day audit. But that would be the typical length of an audit. We will come in. The first thing we're going to be concerned about, of course, is safety in the facility, making sure that we understand what we have to do as an auditor, and also sometimes we have observers that come along to not in any way hinder your operation or create a safety hazard. We're going to take a quick look at your existing quality management system. Again, we're not doing a quality management system audit. We're doing really an audit of your manufacturing process, but the basis for that is the QMS. And then we're going to branch into all of the different topics which we were talking about. We'll generally start off looking at some of the more general aspects of your facility, and then we will pick what we call an audit group. We'll have, we may say we want to look at one of your products, to be precise. We'll say pick one of your products, and we'll go through how that product would be manufactured. We also take a look at the process validation for that product, and we will actually go out on the plant floor and see that product being manufactured and look at all of those different processes. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. Of course, there's a lot more that's going on, but hopefully that's a quick snapshot of what we're doing during an audit.
Okay, great. And then once a supplier is audited, how long is the accreditation valid?
Accreditation is valid for 1 year.
Okay. And then could you give some advice for a company looking to get started with the accreditation process?
Okay, well, you can see the screen hopefully in front of you there with Justin McCabe's name. And I would recommend that you contact Justin. You can see his email address there, and you can also see his telephone number listed. And Justin, I think you're actually online. I don't know if you wanted to say anything or not, but Justin's the right guy to get a hold of to proceed with this.
Okay, great.
Justin, do you want to say anything?
Just quickly, yeah. So you can also get involved in the MedAccred Plastics Task Group as well. So we're always looking for subject matter experts to get involved. So.
All right. Thanks, Justin. That's good to know. And I'm not sure who would best answer it. We just had a question come in. Can you highlight some of the findings in the clean rooms? Maybe Dave, you could talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I could. So it's it's going to of course vary. Take a look at your facility and see where you might have contamination sources that you hadn't maybe really thought about. For example, many facilities have chairs in the clean room. And take a look at the back of your chair and see what that's made out of. Is it made out of something that could possibly be generating contamination? That's something we see. Do you have computers located in the clean room? If you do have computers located in the clean room, might you potentially have an issue with dust coming out of the vents of that computer? Okay, so I just got to some of the more exotic or unusual, or I shouldn't say unusual, actually I see consistently these kinds of issues popping up. But those are maybe things that people don't really think about with the clean room. Now, as far as is the clean room actually properly certified, we generally see that there's adequate documentation for that, though we're going to be looking for that, of course. We're also going to be looking, for example, if you're monitoring your clean room on a regular basis for temperature and humidity, if that's a requirement. And if you're doing that, will the instruments that you're using for that, are they calibrated so that you know that they're in fact giving you good results? Just a few of the things in a clean room environment that you might run into.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that's all the questions we had come in. So thank you so much, Dave, Roy, and Sasha. You really covered a lot in kind of a short amount of time, so I really appreciate it. I know our listeners do too. We welcome our listeners to access a recording of today's webinar that will soon be posted on our website and the YouTube channel. And the next webinar in our critical manufacturing series will take place on July 12th, and this one will be on sterilization. As all of the webinars in this series, this one will feature again a staff engineer for MedAccred, as well as an expert representative from industry who will talk about that topic. And stay tuned for an invitation, or you can register now on Medmarc's website. Thank you for joining us. This concludes today's webinar.